Hi, I'm Philip Wilshire, and you're watching a podcast where nostalgia comes alive. It's Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. Roll it.
Welcome to Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, where nostalgia comes alive. Join Jake and his friends on a journey through pop culture of the past, where they interview professionals in the worlds of acting, directing, writing, puppeteering, and so much more. Who will they be chatting with today? Find out in this Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, where nostalgia comes alive. Happy to hear with us. Thank you for joining. I'm your host, Jake Duffenbach, with me today. Of course, our co-host, Chris Bixby, and Matt Dingle. How you guys doing?
Doing good.
Doing good. Hello, everybody. How are you, Jake?
Doing great, Matt. Thank you for asking.
Good. Who do we have today?
Today's guest we have for today, she's an executive and producer. Of course, we'll touch base throughout her career, throughout this entire interview, including recently she published her Beatles biography, a book. I saw them standing there, and which we're excited to get into later on. And of course, a lot more. Please welcome Debbie Gendler. Welcome, Debbie. Welcome. Happy to have you here.
Thank you. Happy to be here, Jake. Been looking forward to this.
Absolutely.
That means a lot. Absolutely, yes. Great to have you here. So to kick things off, we know who you are, but for those who haven't, can you tell our audience a bit about yourself and what you do?
Okay, sure. Basically, I'm a TV producer, development executive, and I developed lots and lots of TV shows over the year, including launching Home and Garden TV and helping with the Food Network and launching National Geographic Channel in the US. So I've done a lot. I worked at CBS TV for many years in New York, and they moved me to Los Angeles in the very late 1970s, and been, active. When I got out here to LA, I didn't know anyone, and I was encouraged to revisit my Beatles roots as a young fan and teenager, and that's how I got back involved in it, because I left New York. I didn't have friends, and people said, get involved in the Beatle community in LA. They're very active. So that's what I did. And so after about a 10-year lapse, I then got involved again with the whole Beatle world, and went to the Fest for Beatles fans and started to re-explore what I had started as a 13-year-old.
Very nice. So, what was your childhood like, and how did you grow up?
Well, interesting. My childhood, it was fairly lonely. I grew up in a small town in New Jersey, and I really, as I look back now, the Beatles sort of rescued me. I knew that I wanted to get out of this town. I didn't want a life that, many faced. I felt that there were bigger things. New York City was only 26 miles away. My grandmother, my aunts, uncles, my rest of my whole family lived there. I spent my weekends primarily in New York City. And the Beatles came about in a very interesting way. Family friends went to the UK on a trip, and they brought me back the best-selling album of the time. This was the end of April 1963, and wow, I took one look at the album cover and said, I love these guys, the four cutest guys I had ever seen in my life. But I had trouble getting people in my seventh grade class to like the Beatles as much as I did. They didn't hear it in the music. They didn't see it in their cute long hair, which, was so revolutionary then and not long at all from the cover by today's standards. But I managed to get the address of their fan club in London, and I wrote a letter and I said, please let me join. I love the Beatles and I want to join. But never heard back from them for a long time, till one day I came home from school and there was a lawyer's Western Union yellow piece of paper telegram sent to my name at my address. And it said, the business organization of the Beatles are coming to New York to plan a visit. And we need to find fans that we are sure know who the Beatles are and love the Beatles. Please come to our lawyer's office. And my mother explored a little bit, and my dad, on a Veterans Day, I didn't have school, so school was closed, drove me to New York City, where this whole thing started.
That's pretty amazing. And then
I
as we'll
love
get into
that.
later, it's really amazing. So have you always wanted to get into like executive work and producing?
You know what? Probably yes. And that was due to my early exposure going to the Ed Sullivan Show, sitting in the audience. I also went to game shows in New York at the NBC building. My grandmother lived along the D train stops, and the D train
Hmm.
stopped right underneath, right in Rockefeller Center. So if it was raining, if it was snowing, you know what? You didn't have to go outside. You went right from the subway up escalator to NBC building. And when it was bad weather, they needed people to sit in the audience. You didn't even have to plan that much ahead. They were, especially in snowstorms, if they were taping something. I remember we went to this game show called Concentration
Hmm.
many
Mm-hmm.
times. And it was hosted by this guy by the name of Hugh Downs. And I remember sitting in the audience as a little kid. And that's really how my fascination with TV and production started. And that was really what I wanted to study and what I wanted my career, um, to be. I wanted to work in TV.
That's awesome. So I'm kind of curious. Do you remember what your very first job was in the TV world?
Oh, absolutely. That's easy. Um, right out of college, I went to CBS TV, not because of the Ed Sullivan thing. That's where the job was. They came
Right.
to school campus and they offered two jobs, and I got one of the two. And
Hmm.
I went to work at the Walter Cronkite newsroom for the first 3 months of my time at CBS at the Broadcast Center on West 57th Street. It was a really tough job. And after 3 months, I agreed with the news director or whoever I was dealing with. There was actually a man by the name of Neil Waldman who ran the research archives. It was a hard job, and you had to really climb up to get reels of film down, actual film, to be used in that night's nightly news. It was a little much for me, and they thought I'd be much better suited in the entertainment area. So I did. I went over there and I was a program coordinator in the entertainment. What that meant is I would work with the ad agencies in making sure that the commercials ran in the right place in the shows. And I did that for a while. Then I was moved and worked in Mr. Paley's office, Bill Paley, head of CBS, for about 18 months. And then he said, "Oh, you don't belong here. You should move into the executive level." So I got a job in a low level executive position, which was really in 1974 when that happened. For a woman to even be considered in a low level executive position at a TV network was a fairly prestigious compliment to me. And I worked my way up. I did everything. And in early January of 1978, they called me in and said, "We're moving you to LA." And in 2 weeks, I was working in LA. They packed me up, moved me out here, and I spent the next, I'd say, almost 8 years working for them here in Los Angeles.
Interesting. So that's kind of a perfect segue. What was it like working as a TV executive? What exactly did you get to do as a TV executive?
Wow. I mean, so much, and it all depended as it evolved. Um, I I worked in advertising and promotion. I plotted the network promotion schedule. What that was is that there are many availabilities in the TV schedule where you get to promote different TV shows. And everyone, of course, would want their shows promoted during the highest rating shows. So people always wanted to be in 60 Minutes. People wanted to be in All in the Family. They wanted to be eventually in Dallas and Knots Landing and the big shows when I did that. And I would decide. It was a pretty powerful position, really. It doesn't sound like much, but let me tell you, the producers came running after you, trying to entreat you to promote their shows um, in those locations um, that were available. After about 18 months of doing that in LA, I got moved again and I was moved into the feature films and late night area. And that was a pretty interesting position. I was reading scripts and watching movies. I did what was called pre-buys. CBS was very famous for having like Sunday night at the movies, Saturday night at the movies, Monday night at the movies. And they were 2 hour blocks from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. and prime time. And we were in the movie business. And what my particular function was is to read scripts or look at movies. And we would shoot TV versions. I can tell you, I was only on the job for probably 3 weeks when a script landed on my desk and I read it and I thought, I was told I'll read like hundreds and nothing will be good. And it was about just right at the beginning. And it was amazing. And I thought, wow, this is going to do well. And it was the movie 10 with Bo Derek and Dudley Moore. No one heard about Dudley Moore. No one in America knew him. The role was supposed to go to someone else, but that person fell out. And I think I remember it was the actor George Siegel who was originally slated to play that role with Bo Derek. But I went to the bosses and I said, I think I found a film that's going to do really well in the box office, and we should buy it from script. And in buying it from script, what would happen is that they would shoot an alternative version. There's a scene in the film where Dudley Moore is looking at gals gathered around, semi-naked gals gathered around a hot tub. But for TV, obviously, the network standards and practices wouldn't let us show that. So
Right.
at the
Mm-hmm.
time, we shot a TV version when they were shooting the actual film. Saved a lot of money. The network gave a letter of intent to buy the film 18 months after it premiered in the box office. And we got the film for really cheap. And it did extraordinarily well in the box office. And then for us, and we had rights to repeat it on several occasions. And the TV version was all shot. So it was a big savings for everyone. And I did that again with films like Amityville Horror. Um, Shawshank Redemption was one of the films I bought from script. And oh boy. And there were several others, which I just can't remember. Maybe by the time we're done, I'll remember which ones. But there were a lot of big box office. Oh, here I remember Caddyshack. And
Yes, great
Caddyshack
movie.
was a huge movie. We paid next to
Hmm.
nothing for it and did extraordinarily well. I mean, it does well still when it's aired now on, on TV, even broken up
Hmm.
commercials or on cable now, if you can get it, or I don't know if it's streaming yet, but anyway, so that's sort of what I did. And then late night development, where it was a time right before David Letterman's show started, we kept looking for some late night things because, of course, CBS was getting clobbered by Johnny Carson for years and years. And so we started to do late night development, and we developed a couple of entertainment shows, didn't do so well. But then we did do a thing with um, some mysteries, and we got that going. It was shot in Toronto. It was called Night Heat, and it was produced with Sonny Grosso and Larry Jacobson. Now, Sonny was the famed New York City cop from a lot of the action films. So Sonny Grosso was really like just major person to come on with us and collaborate and do some crime based dramas.
Awesome.
So you also served as a Women in Film's first LA-based executive director. What was that like?
Um, I'll tell you the truth, miserable. And I went there. I was a member of Women in Film, and they were looking for someone from the industry. I had just had my daughter, and I thought, active production was really getting just too much for me. And I was away from home. The hours were very long, and there was some travel involved, and I just wanted to be home. So I went, and they were looking for an executive director, and I really thought it was going to be a nurturing, wonderful experience to help promote women within the industry. It was, in my opinion, a very difficult time in the organization. It has resurfaced in major ways and gained in tremendous credibility since the years that I was there. But in while I was there as executive director, there was constant fighting. It was not the nurturing experience. And after about 18 months, I was happy to get out of there. And I went to work on a show on ABC TV. It was a daily daytime show called The Home Show. And it was very much to my liking and suitable because it was geared on ABC to women at home, raising kids, cooking, finance, medical, fashion, multi topic, bringing in experts, authors. It was a show that really catered to my particular interests at the time, and frankly still does, even though it's not on the air anymore.
Right.
So,
Right. So you were also the vice president of development for Weller Grossman Productions, which produced a lot of shows in the 90s and early 2000s. What was that experience?
okay, well, it was a very, very gratifying job position. I was head of development for Weller Grossman for 17 years. Over those 17 years, we produced well over 9,000 episodes of television for
Wow.
36 broadcast and cable networks.
Wow.
We produced Weller Grossman, Rob Weller, Gary Grossman. Rob was a former host. He was an early host with Mary Hart of Entertainment Tonight. Gary Grossman was a producer. Um, we had a wonderful, wonderful run in the earliest days as the forerunner of cable television programming. and we launched networks, and we produced shows for everyone from Animal Planet to Lifetime to A&E, massive amounts of programming for A&E. We were one of the originators of their biography series, have done probably about 23 biographies, everyone from like Larry King to Stan Lee to Annette Funicello. I mean, just a lot of iconic TV people. And after that, I mean, we launched networks of National Geographic. I spent like 3 months on and off in Washington, D.C., going through their archives to see what they owned, which was surprisingly little. The copyright for many of their shows that they thought they could build the network on wasn't really owned by them. It was owned by the photographers who actually shot the shows for them, and then ownership reverted to them. So they didn't really own a lot of what they thought they previously owned from National Geographic Presents and other shows. So I was very busy at Weller Grossman. After about 17 years, it came to a close where hardcore reality TV moved in, and a lot of cable, like from Bravo and all of that, from Real Housewives franchises and things like that. The principals of the company really decided they didn't want to get into that kind of programming, really. So everyone sort of reverted to other things. And in my case, fortunately, the old home show that I went to that aired on ABC had new life on the Hallmark Channel. And shortly thereafter, in 2012, I went and rejoined that same show that now became called Home and Family on the Hallmark Channel. And I was there for several years, heading up the talent department and booking everyone from celebrities to authors to experts in multi-disciplines. So that was pretty much my career. And after that went away, I found myself suddenly free, which I was sort of looking forward to. And but my friend Andrew Solt, who bought the Ed Sullivan Show from the Sullivan family in 1990, asked me to come on and sort of consult and research and work with him. And I've been doing that since 2018. So my life really, where I didn't really mention this at start, but when I sat in the audience of the Ed Sullivan Show for the Beatles' first appearance on February 9th, 1964, I was 13 years old. Now, 60 years later, right before this podcast, I was actually talking with Andrew about some aspects of the Sullivan catalog. And sure enough, I'm doing this 60 years later. It's been a full circle.
Oh, absolutely.
That's amazing.
That's so great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's one of the things that you're currently doing, and from being like a audience, seeing them, and then like actually kind of a part like a part of it, today, after all these years, like, oh my gosh, I must have, it must have been like a wow
It is
moment for
every
you.
day. Every day. It
Oh,
truly is,
yeah.
because I'm still very active. I mean, it's only part-time work. I try and keep my life going and other things too. However, it's, I'm like an old timer there, the editors are young guys like you. who, because it's not just Beatles or Stones or The Doors, but there's comedians on the show of Myron Cohen and Jackie Mason and Ella Fitzgerald and Nat King Cole. And so I'm sort of there as the, you know, older senior person who can, you know, just give some input and direction in dealing with and editing some of these iconic clips that we do. We work with Universal Music Enterprises now. We have streaming channel going on, very active, and you can catch Ed Sullivan shows on Pluto TV and Me
Nice.
TV, and
Ooh.
do things on Spotify, on Sirius XM. They do a lot with our comedy things, clips. So yeah, so we're there on fast channels now. We work with several fast channels, so we keep the Ed Sullivan Show active and still happening. And yeah, that's it.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's great to hear. So now, since you kind of talked a little tiny bit of it about you kind of help launching the National Geographic channel in the U.S. here, what was that kind of like for you getting to be a part of that, especially back in that time, you never had that experience to actually launching a channel like one of
Channel.
those like National Geographic. So what's the kind of different from the way you've done before getting to like launch like and how was like your overall experience to be
Okay.
a part of that?
Um, well, as I said previously, I spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C., going through their archives because what I needed to do was I was sent there to see their ownership and then to try and build repurposed shows from what they originally felt that they owned, which was very little. But I was able to put through um, a plan of show possibilities and for different day parts, a kids block on, let's say, Saturday or Sunday morning, 2 hour documentaries, and come up with show concepts. Um, it The biggest challenge was not in putting the network together. We ended up doing these dark green book with all the different day parts and ideas for other shows that could be then launched and built out of those shows by some of their biggest explorers, photographers, and things like that. But we were called upon to come up with a program for the launch of the network. And that was really a lot of fun because we were able to entice the Ford Motor Company to come in and be our overall sponsor for the launch. So we had some money to work with. We rented a theater in Washington, D.C. I think it was called like Wadsworth or what, started with the W, the theater, where we would put on a live show. We then had to get some celebrities to partake in the show. And we first reached out to Pierce Brosnan, Pierce to be the host of the launch show by making a donation to his Oceans campaign. So we did a Save the Oceans that Pierce was very involved in. He's a wonderful guy and down to earth, like you wouldn't believe. We flew him to Washington, D.C. And we had a limo hired for him, but we didn't need it because the theater, and this was in a January too, though. It was really cold in DC. But he goes, no, don't spend money on a limo for me. And every morning I went over to the hotel, met him, and for 4 mornings while he was there, we walked from his hotel over to the theater, just about 4 blocks away. But that's how down to earth. Then we decided we needed some other people for the show. So we got John Cleese to participate. So he lived up in the Santa Barbara area. We flew him to LA and then, to Washington, D.C. And then we needed a music act for this big launch on the channel. And amazingly, we got Pat Benatar to come on the show. Pat and her husband, Neil Girardi, and her daughter, Hannah, came with them. And we flew all three of them out to DC. And Pat did, with her husband, a fabulous show. It was a wonderful, wonderful launch for the Nat Geo channel in the US. And from there, we started the channel. We gave them ideas for shows. We did the launch show, and our work was basically done for the National Geographic channel. But it was a wonderful send off for our part with Pierce and John Cleese, who was really funny, and Pat Benatar music. Was great.
You also got to work with folks like Tyler Florence, Candace Nelson, and Mike Rowe when they started their TV careers. What was it like getting to work with them?
Well, Tyler, we really started. Candace was not even an entity when I pitched her. We shot her tape in her little apartment galley kitchen, if you can believe that. At first, the Food Network was not interested in Candace at all. They weren't even interested in the idea of a cupcake show, that they thought, sprinkles, what's that? And cupcakes, who would watch a show? And Mike Rowe, I cast in a show for the History Channel. He had just gotten kicked off of QVC for some behavior that they felt wasn't in line with the QVC audience, but he was on there selling late one night, and my husband was in India, and I was hearing all these crazy noises in the house all night long. So I started to keep a TV on in my house, and Mike was the host, and I saw him and I thought, this guy's sensational and he's funny. So I went back to Weller Grossman, and Mike was not on QVC anymore. And I contacted him and convinced the A&E History Channel executives he would do a great job for them. And then from there, he then moved on to the Discovery Channel for Dirty Jobs. But for us, he did a History Channel show for a couple seasons, and he was terrific to work with. So I really appreciated all the people. Candace, I met very early on, before even Sprinkles was a store or had a location. She was friends, while she was an investment banker, with a family member of mine. And so when Candace came to LA, she came to see me in my office. And that's how I got to know her.
That's
Interesting.
awesome.
So moving on to the Beatles, you had mentioned earlier that you had written to the fan club and all that earlier. Growing up, did you have any favorite Beatles albums or songs?
My favorite Beatle album is Rubber Soul. It was and still is. I love that album. I think it took the Beatles from the I Want to Hold Your Hand stage to start progressing to their more sophisticated music. So that definitely is my favorite album. I had a favorite song, though, from earlier on, from the US version of the Something New album, called Things We Said Today. I had a lovely correspondence with George Martin about that particular song, and had an opportunity in 1967 when I went to England to discuss that with George Martin personally. And then later again, when I saw George Martin in France at Meetum, the music industry conference in Cannes, I saw him there again. So we had several conversations on the song. It was always a favorite and also still is. I love that song.
That's wonderful. I mean, there over the years, there's been such amazing like albums and songs. Oh my gosh. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
There's so many. Oh yeah, of course, some of the classics. Twist and Shout, Love Me Do, Yesterday, um, A Hard Day's Night.
Mhm. I mean, there's so many. It's like you can't
Right.
discuss them. My favorites have really come down to the fact that I've had, some personal story interaction or things like that because there's no other way to really describe the music.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think Revolver's got a lot of good songs
Mhm.
on it
Oh
too.
yeah.
Revolver's a great one.
Right. Yeah.
It sort of for me goes really from Rubber Soul really into Revolver. That's
Yeah.
like for
Yeah.
me the big change. A lot of people look to Sergeant Pepper as really the
Oh
breakthrough.
yeah.
I
Oh
look
yeah,
at
for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh yeah.
I look at that in the segue from Revolver into Sergeant Pepper is the era when the female fans sort of began to move into their own lives and the male
Yeah.
fans began to come on board. So
Yeah.
I'd say for me, that's the transitional. The Beatles at the beginning were purely a real female phenomenon.
Oh yeah.
And it was sort of then after Rubber Soul. I mean, my Beatle fan club chapter in New Jersey, we only had one guy member. That's it. One guy. Rest girls. And I had several hundred members in my club. I think then that, the females like me or whatever, I mean, they began to have their own life. They began to really um, have their own lives. They started have interest in, life and whatever. And then the guys just moved in and they still have. And I am part of a collective, a loose, not formal, but a loose one where we, as the teen girls, that we feel we launched Beatlemania,
Oh yeah.
have really
Yes.
tried to now establish ourselves as trying to take back our place, our rightful place in the story of the Beatles. That the guys, and here I am talking to three guys, but that the guys have really tried to move in on us and relegate us to, oh, you were just the screaming teens and you don't know. But we as guys really study the Beatles, we're serious looking at the Beatles musically, historically, and
Yeah.
coming up with all these books. And you girls just were screaming. That's really one of the reasons I wrote my book. I saw them standing there because I wanted to show that it was not just screaming, but that
Yeah.
women, young girls, and we became women, found careers, took this seriously, and have a legitimate stake in the Beatles story, not just those who write about on, April 24th, 1967, Paul was here and John was doing this with Yoko. It's like
Right.
there's another story too. So my book has been well received from those people who really understand the importance of what the early female fans contributed and what we did in the whole Beatle,
Right.
epic story.
Yeah.
Right.
Because you know how oh my gosh, Beatlemania was like huge. Back in that time, we were like if because I remember there were like videos on YouTube where just so still mind blowing even to even think about it. You know, haven't seen those videos in a little bit, where like oh my gosh, like back then, and like they were so huge, like literally like the crowds was just like all packed, and
Even
they were just
yeah.
and like oh my, all the screaming and all of that. I'm like oh my gosh, especially their performance at the Shea Stadium.
Oh my god.
Oh my god,
Yes. I mean, I
such
Yes.
think that was
like
like
Shea
the first
Stadium
like
was
oh that was
Shea
huge.
Stadium was amazing. I
Hmm.
was there,
yes.
and
Oh,
you
you
know,
did?
You were
Wow.
actually there?
oh yeah,
Oh
Wow.
wow.
oh yeah.
That's
That's
cool.
awesome.
Third row, Sid Bernstein's tickets. Sid
Wow.
Bernstein
Third
was the promoter.
wow.
Was
Wow.
the
Wow.
promoter, and it was Sid who 2 days before Shea Stadium introduced me to the Beatles at the Warwick Hotel. And that's where I met the Beatles, at the Warwick. I describe it a lot in my book. And
Oh
so
my
I met the Beatles
goodness.
on August 13th, 1965, at the Warwick Hotel. I went to their press conference, and there's pictures of me at the press conference and pictures I took of the Beatles. And then I met them afterwards. And then 2 days later, I went to Shea Stadium, and I must tell you that on Sunday night, just this past Sunday night, I came home from visiting the Brooklyn Museum, where I was invited by the Brooklyn Museum. And I guess I've been told by Paul McCartney's approval, where I curate 3 of his pictures that he took, his photographs. Paul's exhibit of like his photographs that he discovered during the pandemic. They were at the National Portrait Gallery in London. They made a stop in Norfolk, Virginia, and it opened in May in New York City. And I'm there. My name is on a plaque in the New York room, right there, talking about being at the Plaza Hotel, being at the Ed Sullivan Theater. I narrate or add background to 3 of Sir Paul's photographs in that New York room. And I'm right up there. You can even access what I say online, Brooklyn Museum. It's Bloomberg Philanthropies, and I'm number 225. There aren't 225. Not to get scared. Things.
Mhm.
No, they like start at like 200, and Paul narrates some. I narrate 3. Um, and it's really amazing and an honor to have been invited. There are only a couple other people. A Beatles scholar, Christine Feldman Barrett, who lives in Australia. She talks about a couple of things in Miami from the female Beatle fan viewpoint. She's one of my colleagues in trying to reclaim our uh, importance in the story. And Alan Kozin who writes music for the New York Times, and me. That's it. And then Sir Paul and his daughter Mary. That's it in the narration of the museum. So I went to see my name hanging on the wall right there next to just amazing photographs that Paul took in New York City during that first trip, February 1964. So it
Nice.
sort of continues, and I went immediately before that. As I was going to New York, I stopped in Cleveland, and my book is now at the um, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in their library and archives. So
Oh wow.
my book
That's wonderful.
was added to the archive. So I just came back on Sunday from the book being delivered to the archives, which was a lovely, lovely experience in doing that. And then the Brooklyn Museum. So I'm sort of like back on the Beatles thing again, but
Yeah,
That's awesome. I
it's
love
it's
that.
insane how huge Beatlemania was, because it wasn't just here. It wasn't just in the UK. You would mention Australia a moment ago. It got as far out as Australia. And I think I saw something recently. I believe it was in Adelaide, Australia, back in June of '64. Like 350,000 people, like lined the streets to get a glimpse of the Beatles.
Mhm.
Like it just wow. I mean, as far out as Australia, that's
Oh yeah.
and
I
even
mean,
and
Oh
even them
yeah.
performing and even them performing at the Royal Variety Performance. I think it was, I don't know if it was 63 or 64. That was, I'm sure, huge for them as well. Like it got
63.
huge quick.
Yeah, yeah, it did. It did. It blew up. And of course, the Ed Sullivan Show. Um, when I was seated in the audience, I was one of 728 lucky people who had a ticket. And there were 73 million people watching that night. And
Yeah.
that was when the population of the United States was only 191 million people. So
Wow.
when you think of 191 million people in the US and 73 million of that were watching the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, it's like mind blowing. Like, how can you imagine that many people? You know?
Especially for that time.
Yeah,
Especially
for
for
that
that time,
time
because
with that, yeah, population.
yeah, that and again, the for the time, that's huge. 73 million people, because not everybody had like a TV back then.
No,
What don't I'm trying to think. I'm sure we had color TV at some point, but I feel like I don't think everybody had it at that point. Because
CBS, the Beatles were on the last, well, it was taped on the Saturday between their arrival when I met the Beatles on Friday. That Saturday they taped an episode to air September 12th. That was the last black and white show of Ed Sullivan. Unfortunately, they missed it just by a little bit. That Ed Sullivan, after that September 12th premiere in 1965, the show went color. So
Mhm.
mm,
there were no color appearances of the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Right.
So it wasn't until then that they could. NBC started airing color, I think, a little bit before CBS,
yeah, yeah,
but never really got the Beatles in color, unfortunately.
hmm,
Right.
They later sent in videos. They did some interviews with Ed later, and they sent in like videos with like paperback writer and rain and a few other things like that they would send in to Ed, and Ed would play them like first on his show. But as far as in person, no.
Right.
gotcha.
Definitely. So that's also a perfect segue. So going back to the Ed Sullivan Show performance, because of course you were there. Technically, you were kind of a part of the Beatles kind of getting off their feet in a way, because you got to see their, you know, first, appearance, on the Ed Sullivan Show. What was that? What was it kind of like to kind of be a part of them getting off their feet?
Um, well, how I explained how I sort of got the ticket really was because I went to New York, and at the
Right.
lawyer's office, they said, thank you. If Brian signs the deal or agrees to the deal later that very day with Ed Sullivan, and they go on the Ed Sullivan Show, we will send you a ticket. I waited very anxiously because after that point, there was the Kennedy assassination, which
Right,
really
yeah.
set us back a whole lot in America. I can
Right.
tell
Yeah, it
you
did.
it was devastating to America. And I mean, the world for all of us really shut down like it did in the pandemic. That's how it shut down. We were glued to our TV sets. I mean, we actually saw a live murder on TV when Jack Ruby leaned forward and shot Lee Harvey Oswald. I mean, right on our screens, Jack Ruby leaned in, took a pistol, and shot Lee Harvey Oswald live on television. I mean, it was like the whole thing was horrifying. And, the Beatles like really came at that point to sort of, people say, to rescue us. I don't know if it was because of it or not, but I can tell you what a relief it was to suddenly have this music and something that we could really get involved in. And whereas I was sort of deemed a bit of a nut by all the people in my school because I kept talking Beatles and Beatles, they appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show. And I got to tell you, in one day, from Sunday night to me walking in to my 8th grade class that Monday morning, I was like a superstar. Okay. The vice principal asked me to bring in to school the next day my Please Please Me album because he heard that I had an album from England of the Beatles. And people started to go and look for their own copy of Meet the Beatles or the 45 of I Want to Hold Your Hand. And, and whereas people heard I was going to see the Beatles the week before at school at the Ed Sullivan Show, I really didn't speak that much about it because I had taken such emotional abuse from the people in my school that why was I still liking this, whatever. And in a day, it all changed for me. And my basement became like a Beatles headquarters where after school every day, everyone came to sit in my basement and talk about the Beatles and play Beatle music and wonder what's happening with the Beatles and getting the latest news and all the magazines that suddenly happened. And I told the story about getting to the Sullivan Theater, and my seat was up on the mezzanine. I wasn't in the orchestra. I was told to go upstairs, and I followed rules. They said, sit here, and I sat in the seat. And Ed Sullivan introduced the Beatles, and it's like we all gasped and screamed. It was just a situation that we all just went crazy over, and Ed told us to quiet down, but it was really difficult. We had to sit through those excruciating acts in between the Beatles. First, they did 3 songs first, and then they came back, closed the show with 2 more songs at the end. It was really difficult to sit through the whole show and be quiet and not be talking with each other. And when it was over, it was incredibly sad. But I gathered up my stuff and I walked outside and I thought, well, maybe the show is over. But boy, for me, these Beatles would be around forever. And hey, look, 60 years later, I'm still talking about it. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
I love that. That is,
Absolutely.
I love that very much. I mean, I'm kind of like what I said earlier. Like like everyone was like, like no matter what's been happening, back then about what happened in the world, like the Beatles was like one of the most like positive like things that's out there that like they didn't think about what's going on and they just want to just like be proud to see them as much as possible, and I just love what I mean. Of course, there are times where during the whole show where people just like keep talking during when especially like yesterday, for example, where but there are times where I hear like like which that video, which that performance is on YouTube, where I can literally clearly hear them in the audience say like, "Be quiet," and but like at the same time, back then it was so different, but at the same time it was so the Beatles make what they are to make trying to do with the positive part, and I
Yeah.
just love that very much.
Absolutely.
It was a wonderful, wonderful time. I
I
have to
bet.
tell you, and like other people my age, people might deny how old they are. I have to tell you something. I welcome my age completely because you know what? If I didn't have it, I wouldn't have had these amazing, incredible stories to share because it was a time unlike any other time where there was so much like love and joy and just plain old good times to be had. And you could have them. Everyone could have them.
Yes.
It wasn't like it wasn't separated in any way. You know, everyone was accepted. You were a Beatles fan.
Yes,
And
exactly. No matter what you think of,
oh,
like you're accepted.
yeah, yeah,
You can like the Beatles. You can
yeah.
like,
And
Yeah.
you can like the Stones too.
Yeah.
right? Yeah, exactly.
Everyone tries to make it like there was a big war. No, I mean, yeah, I went to see the Stones at um in June 1964 at Carnegie Hall, just a couple months after the Beatles, right? And you know, and people say, "Oh, you're not being honest to the Beatles." You know what? There was room for everyone, and I loved the Kinks, and I loved the Yardbirds, and yeah, I was just telling the people at the Ed Sullivan Show. We were talking just yesterday. I was over there, and we were talking about the British invasion, and I said it's so sad that I mean Ed had on, not just Beatles but Stones and Peter and Gordon and Freddie and the Dreamers and the Searchers, Peter and Gordon, um, and I just loved it when the Stones came on, and I said, it's so sad that he didn't have the Kinks on or the Yardbirds on and all that. And we
Yeah.
were all in agreement sitting there that we needed even more British invasion bands. So, but it was just a wonderful, wonderful, exciting time to love music. And I must say, I did receive, after I met the Beatles, several newspapers wrote stories about me. Debbie gets to welcome the Beatles because I was like the first teen in there at the press conference, sort of welcoming the Beatles at the Warwick. And I got hate mail.
Oh, wow. Really?
I put one of the letters or cards in my book, showed it, and they wrote over my picture that appeared in the paper, "You're nuts. What's wrong with our American boys? They're laughing at you and taking advantage." And I thought, to send in 1965, in August 65, I was already 15 when I met the Beatles. And I said, do you really send to a 15-year-old girl hate mail and tell them they're nuts? But there was a lot of that going on in America. People felt threatened by the Beatles. People felt
Yeah.
threatened by the cultural change that the Beatles brought. What was happening with clothes, with style, with politics. It was Vietnam. It was Bob Dylan. It was Allen Ginsberg. It was people there felt threatened by them of what was happening. But to send hate mail to a 15-year-old who loved a band, so there was part of that in all of this time.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So
Interesting.
anyway,
Yeah.
pretty much it. It was as much fun as it was. There was a very serious side to what was happening in America.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, especially since all this happened, not long after President Kennedy was assassinated. It was a strange time for America. I'm sure, because
And it
it
still is.
was.
You know, everyone still talks about the conspiracy. You
Oh
know,
Hmm.
yeah.
at
Yeah.
that point, everyone in the Warren Commission was sure that, oh, there was no conspiracy. Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. I think that theory has been completely debunked. Now, who did it? Who knows? But I think that the lone gunman theory has been sort of dismissed. But who knows?
Who
Right.
knows?
My lifetime, I will
Right.
not know the end.
Right.
But
Hmm.
maybe you guys will.
I don't know about that.
Mhm.
I don't know about that.
Mhm.
Maybe who knows? But
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know. So you also got to be interviewed about the Beatles for their 1981 film Beatlemania, as well as their documentary The Making of a Hard Day's Night, which, for those who don't know, was their film that came out, I believe, in 1964 as well. What was it like being interviewed about your Beatles fandom, especially back then?
Okay, well, the making of a hard day's night, it was called You Can't Do That, the making of a hard
Hmm.
day. And they actually came out in the middle 90s, about 95 or so. Walter Shenson, the producer of both the Beatles movies, A Hard Day's Night and Help, decided to do that. The rights of the film reverted back to Walter completely after the
Hmm.
film were released, 15 years after the release. Walter owned the movies outright until his two sons sold it after his death. Um, and Yeah, and I talked about sleeping on Broadway. I would do all these crazy things for the fan club. They got to know me because I went and met Brian in that date of 1963 to make sure that they were fans. So the fan club would recruit me to lead different crazy things. And in my book as well, I have a copy of the telegram I received from United Artists to go and sleep overnight on Broadway in Times Square in front of the Astor Theater. And I did that with several other friends and people I was able to get them to go. I was 14 years old. The New York City police guarded us. There were adults there. And it was all like like a press sort of thing to get a photo up for the newspapers to show fans sleeping overnight to be first in line to buy tickets for A Hard Day's Night. It was
Mhm.
quite an evening, let me tell you. To sleep
Absolutely.
on the sidewalk, even though you had sleeping bags and watched over by New York City police. I will never forget one police officer I overheard telling another, look, we're stuck here watching over these screamers when I could be home, he said, watching the Beverly Hillbillies.
Hmm.
That the guy told the other officer he could be watching the Beverly Hillbillies and that
Mhm.
cute Ellie Mae.
Mhm.
So,
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had talked about this previously on the show. Back then, we didn't have like, well, you didn't have like DVRs or even VHS tapes back then. If you missed
Right.
a show, you missed it.
you missed it. And the only hope you ever had is that it went into reruns in the summer.
Yep.
And not every
Mhm.
episode did because there wasn't
Nope.
enough time. And
Right.
they were shooting 22 or 36 episodes in a single season.
Mm-hmm.
They were shooting incredible numbers, not like now, where if you get 8 episodes of a show in a season, that's a lot. They were doing like lots. Some would have 32, 36, 32, 28, or 22. 22 episodes was pretty normal in a season. So yeah, it was like, yeah, that I'll still remember that guy saying he could be home watching it. I was quite insulted by that.
So, moving on now to your book that you recently wrote. I saw them standing there. What kind of went into writing the new book?
Oh boy. Well, it took me 9 years to write it.
Ah,
Mainly because, as we discussed, I was working in TV. I had incredibly long hours doing daily live television, not even tape. It wasn't like working on documentaries where, oh, you'll get to it tomorrow. It had to be right the first time because it was
mm-hmm.
live TV. So I spent 9 years doing it. I had it in my head to write the book um, around 20, I'd say around 2013. I started to make mental notes. But in 2014, for the Beatles' 50th anniversary of coming to America, I was interviewed on a big CBS TV special that actually the Paul and Ringo and their families and Yoko and Sean and Olivia and Danny took part in, and it aired on CBS, and it was the Grammy Awards salute to the Beatles, ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles. It aired for 3.5 hours on CBS, exactly 50 years on that Sunday night, February 9th, 2014 on CBS. And I was interviewed in length for that. And shortly after that show aired, a part of it went on a traveling tour from Lincoln Center to Mall of America to the Woody Guthrie Hall to LBJ Presidential Library. It went all across America. And it finally got to the Grammy Museum in LA. And after it was there, I was part of a panel with like 4 other people talking about the Beatles and participation. And everyone on that panel, there were like 4 men and me. I was the only female. And this gal in the back of the room, all the guys had something to sell. Bob Eubanks, who brought the Beatles to the Hollywood Bowl, he was there. He was selling a poster. One other fellow was an author who's written and is still writing a slew of Beatle books based on all like the day and date and all that I was sort of mentioning earlier. Had books to sell. Everyone had something to sell, but me. And she stood up and she goes, "We want to hear more of your story. Where's your book?" And I thought, I had been thinking about it, but I hadn't done anything. Really, I had just made serious notes in my head. I never wrote anything down all these years. It was all in my head. This whole book, except for my trip to England in 1967, I did not have a single note. And I thought maybe I should do it in time for the 60th anniversary. So I really, in earnest, started writing maybe a chapter on a Sunday, or when the show I was on had a few days off over Christmas. And I mean just a few, because on that show, I even worked like a lot of people do in live TV. I even worked on New Year's Eve. For 6 years, I never even could go anywhere on New Year's Eve because I worked a full day that day. And so finally, after 9 years, I wrote the book, and I sent it to a literary agent who I thought might be well suited. And he said, ultimately, after thinking about it, and he tested the book with some publishers that really felt they weren't sure. He wrote me an email one day and he goes, "We have like a year to the 60th anniversary, and I'm going to sell this book." And sure enough, he did. So it was put out by Backbeat Books. Backbeat does a lot of music books, obviously, by the name Backbeat. And it really takes us from how I got to the Sullivan Show with all, and it details all the crazy stuff I did for the fan club and meeting the Beatles, and then insightful things that I experienced with some of their family members. In 1967, I went and stayed 2 nights with George's parents in Liverpool, Louise and Harry
Oh, nice.
Harold Harrison, in their home in Liverpool. And I talk about that a lot. And I've seen the Cavern Club, the original, before it was demolished for a parking lot. And let's see. And then a lot of the present day things, and including being interviewed for Ron Howard's movie in 2016. I was part of that. I'm on the not in the main film, but on the DVD of all the accompanying interviews that go with it. It's under the area called Three Fans, and I'm one of the three fans in that. And just a lot of other fun escapades that I have had over the years. So that's pretty much it. And you can get it on Amazon or barnesandnoble.com. It's available, and it's also available as an ebook, as an audio book. But I really have to say, I have to encourage, if anyone wants to read it, to really get the actual book, because in the book I have running images, Christmas cards from Yoko. I mean, pictures of a lot of this stuff. I produced for TV Linda McCartney twice in cooking segments. So I share a lot, not just of Linda personally, who I knew, and things of conversations we had in family settings, at personal things, at family parties, as well as professionally producing her. And the same with Yoko, producing Yoko for TV in other experiences, John's Aunt Mimi. I mean, just insights into many of the different people who really contributed to the Beatles' success, and especially my never-ending love and respect for Brian Epstein, which comes for me first and foremost over pretty much everything in my personal Beatles story. The man was lovely to me, respectful, encouraging, and kind. And I try my best, and I think I was successful from the response to the book in conveying that to all who have read it, and understand my appreciation to Brian and of Brian forever.
Nice.
Absolutely.
That's wonderful. Before we're about to kind of wrap things up, I want to mention about about on location appearances, because recently, ever since your book has came out, you've done some on location and appearances to promote the book. So can you like talk about doing those and what was that like?
Uh, Well, you know what? That was really one of the main reasons I wrote the book. Okay. I have to tell you, it was a very minuscule advance. And will I ever see any royalties? Um, Probably never with book publishers' creative thing. And was there a book tour? No, publishers don't invest in that anymore. It really comes down to the author and the author trying to make their way. And the point of writing the book from that gal at the Grammy Museum who shouted, "What about my book?" was really to be able to share in venues, on podcasts like yours, but in also in-person speaking engagements. I really wanted to share the story with people to let them understand from a fan's point of view how it was in the 1960s. What was that experience of sitting at Shea Stadium with 55,000 people screaming around you, or to sit at the Ed Sullivan Show? And so that, and it still is, my ambition is to really do a college speaking tour. That's really what I want to do, is
Okay.
to go to some different schools across the country and to really address music students, sociology students, people who just have an interest in the Beatles or the cultural aspect of the time in which all of this occurred. And I have tried my best to do that. And so I've spoken in some small groups like Rotary Club or fundraising of libraries, and then bigger things like the Grammy Museum that I went to again just a month and a half ago, where I spoke for a members' evening at the Grammy Museum. Or, I mean, I've been, or at the Fest for Beatle fans in New York, where I went to speak at their big convention gathering in New York City at the TWA Hotel several months ago. So I've really enjoyed that and really hope to do more of that, because that's my whole objective, really, in sharing what I experienced with people. And at the end of the book, I did a little domain name, and it's Debbie at isawthemstandingthere.com, for people who have read the book to write in and share their Beatles or individual Beatles stories, because I found that so many people have them, from whether it's, I mean, just today on my Facebook, because Paul McCartney's going to be doing a tour of Latin America again, and then Europe, Paris, Madrid, Manchester, London, coming up at the end of 2024. People are writing, the tickets went on sale, and just, today and yesterday for some of these things. And just amazing that, people are sharing, I'm going to see Paul in Manchester. I got tickets. I'm going to see him in Madrid. You should see. So, the topic is still vital today. And people are
Yes, the Beatles still,
trying
has a
to
huge following still to this
huge
day. Yeah.
following.
Yeah,
60
exactly.
years later, it's really a phenomenon unto itself. So I think that people on a tour that I would love to try and set up. So I'm planning now where the active part of the book is sort of coming to an end. I'm going to be reaching out to maybe some speakers bureaus or things like that to see if I could align myself with someone who, plots like speakers tours, who have entree into some of the you know, campuses where they arrange for an upcoming season, speakers to come. And so we'll see. But that's pretty much for me what's, on the immediate um, horizon. And, we'll see what materializes or how active I can be in lining these things up. It's sad where book publishers don't have that in-house publicity tool like they used to.
Right. Right. So the last question that Matt's about to ask here is a question we ask all of our guests at the end. Go ahead, Matt.
Thank you very much, Chris. If you folks didn't catch it at the beginning, this podcast is called Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. When you think of nostalgia, what do you think of? Or in your own words, how do you define the word nostalgia?
Oh, wow. Hmm. Geez. I mean, I spend a lot of time in the world of nostalgia, basically, I think. My personal life, especially when writing the book, I thought a lot about it. And my work on The Sullivan Show is all about nostalgia because every day I think about the important people who shared their talents. And I just look back and I see nostalgia as a way for us to celebrate maybe the good times of our lives, to experience again for those who maybe didn't have the opportunity to be there front row, to still, though, experience through others. I mean, I just love seeing the old magazines and reading through them. And it's not just in the music world or with bands or with groups and things like that. Mm-mm. I mean, I think nostalgia has to do with history and just, you know, past worlds that we could learn from and understand. And I think, see what happened. I have an old Sears Roebuck catalog from the Paramount Library. Paramount was discarding things from their library, and I happened to be on the lot one day visiting a friend who worked on Entertainment Tonight, and they had books out, and they were big. And so I carried just one that they were looking to get rid of the Sears and Roebuck catalog from 1916. It was used by people who were doing shows or movies that had to be portrayed correctly on clothing and accessories and things like that from that era. And they used the Sears and Roebuck catalogs. And I got to tell you, it's very nostalgic. You look at it and you think, wow, look at those button-up shoes or buttons on clothes, because they really didn't have zippers then and things. So, I look at that. You can find nostalgia pretty much anywhere and everywhere. You can go into a secondhand store or you can go into an estate sale. And you know what? There's a lot of nostalgia there, depending on, old games and, whatever. So I think I think you guys probably carry a very broad look at it because nostalgia does make people happy.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, great words to end on. Well, Debbie, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. This was a blast.
Thank you. I hope you guys had a good time.
Of course.
yes, we had a great time.
Absolutely, yes.
When you'll let me know when this will be up, because I'd love to do a link on my social media.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
sure.
yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
I will let you know with like the day and when it's gonna
Absolutely.
it comes out and
Okay.
all that. So that's great.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you,
Yeah,
Debbie.
of course. Thank you so much, Debbie. Thank you so much again for being here. Of what you've done. What you're doing. Means a lot for you. To people who that you've done. I'm glad that we got to touch base about your book, and definitely I know I've heard it's such a great copy, and especially for Beatles fans too. Most likely will enjoy. So I'm glad we got to talk about it, and keep up the great work what you're doing now. And cannot wait what's next in store.
Okay. Bye.
Enjoy the rest of your day, Debbie.
Take care, Debbie.
Bye.
Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye.
That's
For
goodbye
those
from
of
us
you
as
who
well.
For those who would like to check out her book, once again, the book is called I Saw Them Standing There, Adventures of an Original Fan During Beatlemania and Beyond. You can purchase it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It is published by Backbeat Books. If you'd like to check out her wonderful book, celebrating, I guess, officially 60 years of Beatlemania here in the U.S., from what I hear, it is a fantastic book, highly recommended. Once again, the book is entitled, once again, I Saw Them Standing There, Adventures of an Original Fan During Beatlemania and Beyond. So definitely check it out if you haven't.
Links to where you can purchase that will be in the
Absolutely.
description down below, as well as where you can connect with Debbie.
Yep.
Yes.
But it's goodbye from us as well. Keep on the lookout for more wonderful interviews coming your way. And as always, what do you say, Jake?
Keep nostalgia alive. Take care, everyone. See you next time. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to another wonderful Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show episode. Be sure to follow Jake and the Happy Nostalgia team on social media, check out our website, and stream the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And as always, remember to keep nostalgia alive. Bye-bye.